Ethan had been driving for almost 8 hours when he accepted the ride. Midnight had already slipped past, and the city felt thinner somehow, like most of it had gone to sleep and left only shadows behind. The pickup point was outside a closed tattoo studio, its neon sign flickering like it was running out of patience. She slid into the back seat without a sound. Ethan caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. Early 20s, dark hair pulled back, leather jacket zipped high. What stood out was her tongue piercing, a small silver stud that caught the light even when there wasn't much light to catch. She smiled, slow and polite, and gave her destination in a calm, measured voice. "Long night?" Ethan asked, trying to keep things friendly. "Yes," she said. "Just that. No follow-up." As he pulled away, he noticed something odd. She wasn't looking out the window or at her phone. She was looking at him. Not aggressively, not warmly either. Just watching, like she was studying how his face moved when he blinked. The air inside the car felt colder than it should have. Ethan checked the temperature controls. Normal. Outside, the street lights passed in steady intervals, but the inside of the car felt dimmer with each block. He tried again. "You live around here?" She paused, then nodded. The timing was off. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to make his skin prickle. When she smiled again, the piercing flashed brighter than before. It reflected in the mirror like a tiny spark. Ethan laughed softly to himself. He told himself he was tired. That working nights messes with your head. Still, he noticed she hadn't blinked once since getting in. At a stop sign, he glanced back quickly. Her reflection didn't match her movement. Her head was tilted slightly differently than it should have been, like the mirror was showing a delayed version of her. When she finally blinked, it happened a fraction of a second after he expected it to. She leaned forward just a little, close enough that he could see his own wide eyes reflected in the metal on her tongue. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "what people carry inside them?" Ethan swallowed and kept driving, suddenly very aware that the night outside felt safer than the silence in his car. The traffic light ahead turned red, bathing the intersection in a dull, blood-tinged glow. Ethan eased the car to a stop and let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The silence stretched. No music, no passing cars. Even the city sounded like it had stepped away for a moment. That was when the knocking started. Hard, urgent, right against his driver's side window. Ethan flinched and turned his head. An elderly, homeless man stood inches from the glass. His clothes hung loose on him, layers of coats that didn't match the season. His eyes were wide and wet, fixed not on Ethan, but on the back seat. "Sir," Ethan said through the glass, shaking his head, "I don't have cash." The man ignored him. He raised a trembling hand and pointed past Ethan's shoulder, straight at the girl. His mouth moved silently at first. Then he pressed his face closer to the window, breath fogging the glass. He mouthed a single word, slow and deliberate. "Don't." Ethan's stomach tightened. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The girl was smiling again, wider this time. Her tongue rested against her teeth, the piercing glowing faintly, like it had caught a private source of light. Her eyes never left Ethan's reflection. When he turned back, the homeless man was still there, shaking his head now, almost pleading. He slapped the glass once more, then stepped back suddenly as the traffic light flicked to green. Cars surged forward behind Ethan, horns blaring. He looked away for a second to pull into the intersection. When he looked back, the man was gone. No alley, no doorway, just empty pavement and a bus stop bench soaked in shadow. That was strange, Ethan muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Yes," the girl said softly. "Some people see things they aren't meant to." Ethan's phone vibrated in the cup holder. The GPS screen refreshed on its own, rerouting him off the main road and into a narrow side street he never used. He hadn't touched it. The signal bars were full. He tried to override it. The screen froze. From the back seat, he heard a quiet laugh. Not mocking, almost satisfied. "You should follow it," she said. "It knows where we need to go." Ethan's hands tightened around the wheel as he turned onto the darker street, the city lights thinning behind him, and the feeling growing stronger that he had just ignored the last clear warning he was going to get. The side street narrowed as Ethan drove, buildings pressing closer, their windows dark and unwelcoming. The GPS arrow pulsed gently, as if reassuring him he was going the right way. He wasn't. He felt that deep in his chest. "She's very quiet back there," he said, forcing a light tone. "Most people don't like the scenic route." The girl tilted her head. This time, the movement matched in the mirror. "Almost. I like quiet," she replied. "It makes it easier to hear what stays behind." Ethan frowned. "What stays behind?" She leaned forward again, closer than before. He could smell something cold, like rain on metal. When she smiled, the piercing glimmered sharply. "Do you know why people pierce their tongues?" she asked. He shrugged. "Fashion? Expression?" She shook her head slowly. "Memory." Ethan laughed once, short and uneasy. "That's a new one." "Metal remembers," she continued, ignoring him. "It remembers pain, fear, pressure. When you push it through flesh, you give it a place to listen." The car passed under a broken streetlight, plunging the interior briefly into darkness. When the light returned, Ethan's heart jumped. Her tongue looked longer. Not dramatically, not enough to scream, just enough to be wrong. The piercing sat farther forward now, resting where it hadn't been before. He blinked hard. "You okay back there?" She smiled wider, opening her mouth slightly. The tongue shifted, slow and deliberate, like something stretching after a long sleep. "I'm fine," she said. "They're the ones who get uncomfortable." "They?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. He glanced at the mirror again. Her reflection lagged behind her movements now, dragging like it was stuck in thick air. When she tilted her head, the reflection followed a second later. Worse, her reflection blinked when she didn't. "You don't see it yet," she said gently. "Most drivers don't. Not at first." Ethan's foot hovered over the brake. His pulse thudded in his ears. She pressed her tongue against the inside of her cheek. For a split second, Ethan thought he saw something move beneath her skin, something that didn't belong to a single person. "Every piercing is a door," she whispered, "and every door needs someone curious enough to open it." The GPS chimed softly, announcing a turn ahead. Ethan realized with a sinking dread that he no longer remembered agreeing to take her anywhere at all. The GPS chimed again, louder this time, insisting on a left turn into a street so narrow Ethan didn't remember it existing. The buildings leaned inward, brick and concrete closing around the car like a throat. He slowed, heart hammering. "I think this is far enough," he said. "I can drop you here." The girl didn't answer. In the mirror, she raised a hand to her mouth. Her fingers were steady, almost reverent. The smile never left her face. "No," she said calmly. "This is where you listen." She hooked a finger under the metal stud and pulled. Ethan expected blood, pain, a sharp cry. None of that happened. The piercing slid free without resistance, and the hole it left behind didn't close. It widened. A low sound poured out first, like wind moving through a tunnel. Then voices followed, whispering, crying, overlapping words that refused to separate. Men, women, some young, some old, all frightened. Ethan slammed his foot on the brake. The car screeched, but didn't slow. The radio burst to life on its own, static crackling before a news broadcast cut through. A calm announcer's voice listed missing persons cases. Ethan's chest tightened as he listened. Each description ended the same way. Last seen wearing a tongue piercing. The girl tilted her head back slightly, letting the voices spill freely. The sound fogged the windows, frosting the glass from the inside. Ethan struggled to breathe. "They trusted me," she said almost fondly. They smiled back. They leaned closer. The streetlights flickered, syncing with the rhythm of the whispers. In the reflection, Ethan saw faces forming in the darkness of her mouth. Not clearly, just enough to know they were there. He yanked the steering wheel, trying to force the car to stop. The brakes resisted, stiff and useless beneath his foot. "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "Take what you want. Just let me go." She looked at him with something close to pity. "I already have what I need," she replied. "You're the one who's still deciding." The car accelerated on its own, engine whining as the narrow street stretched ahead, and Ethan understood with crushing clarity that the ride had never been about getting her home. It was about deciding who would speak next from behind that metal smile. The car surged forward, tires screaming as the narrow street seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Ethan's hands shook on the wheel. The voices from the back seat faded into a low murmur, like a crowd whispering behind a closed door. "What do you want from me?" he asked, barely louder than the engine. The girl leaned closer. The cold in the car deepened, frosting the edges of the windshield. She slipped the piercing back between her fingers, holding it up to the light. Inside the metal, Ethan swore he could see movement. Tiny shapes pressing, retreating. "You think I take people," she said. "That I hunt them." She smiled gently. "I don't." Ethan swallowed. "Then what is this?" "I carry them." She explained it the way someone might explain a job they'd done for years. Long ago, she said, pain had learned how to hide. It learned to move from body to body, looking for places it could stay. Piercings were openings. Tongue piercings were perfect, warm, close to breath, close to words. They leave pieces of themselves behind, she continued. Fear, regret, last thoughts they never said out loud. The whispers rose briefly, as if responding to her. Ethan recognized panic in them. Recognition hurt worse than fear. "So they're trapped?" he asked. She shook her head. "Preserved." The word landed heavy. "When a person disappears," she said, "everyone assumes the worst. Death, violence. But some of them are still speaking, still remembering, still here." She slipped the piercing back into place. The hole sealed instantly, smooth and unbroken. The voices vanished. The radio fell silent. The frost melted from the glass. "You could forget this," she said. "Most do." Ethan laughed weakly. "I don't think that's possible." She met his eyes in the mirror. For the first time, her expression hardened. "It is," she said, "if you choose to be quiet." The car slowed at last, rolling to a stop beneath a single working streetlight. She reached for the door handle. "Silence," she added softly, "is how this survives." The door opened, letting in warmer air. As she stepped out, Ethan realized the worst part wasn't what she was. It was how practiced she sounded explaining it. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and for a heartbeat, everything felt normal. Too normal. The engine idled. The streetlight hummed overhead. Ethan sat frozen, waiting for something else to go wrong. Then the car doors locked themselves. The girl didn't walk away. She stood just outside the rear window, watching him. Her reflection appeared in the glass, but her feet never touched the pavement. "You did well," she said through the closed door. Her voice carried easily, as if she were still inside the car. "Most people beg. You listened." Ethan's chest tightened. "You said I could go. I said you could forget." She leaned closer to the window. The piercing glowed again, brighter than before. The metal vibrated, and the whispers returned, louder now, pressing against Ethan's ears from the inside. "Silence keeps it safe," she repeated. Something clicked in Ethan's mind. The homeless man. The word he mouthed. Don't. Not on drive. Don't look. Don't reflect. Ethan reached up and grabbed the rearview mirror. The moment his fingers wrapped around it, the whispers turned into screams. The girl's calm expression shattered. Her mouth opened wide, too wide, and the piercing burned white-hot. "Stop," she hissed. Ethan yanked the mirror free. The world lurched. The streetlight flickered violently. The reflection in the broken mirror showed her true shape for a split second. Not one girl, but many faces layered together, mouths open, eyes begging. He threw the mirror onto the passenger seat. The locks snapped open. The engine died. The silence that followed was sudden and absolute. Outside, the girl staggered back like she'd been struck. Her image in the window fractured, splitting into overlapping reflections that couldn't agree on where she was. No footsteps. No shadow. Just an empty street and a faint metallic smell lingering in the cold air. Ethan didn't wait. He ran until his lungs burned, until the city lights returned, until he found people. Behind him, somewhere far away, something screamed without a voice. And for the first time since the ride began, Ethan knew he had broken the rules. He just didn't know what that would cost him later. Ethan didn't drive for 3 months. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw reflections that didn't line up, faces in glass that moved when he didn't, smiles that lingered a moment too long. He covered the mirrors in his apartment with towels, then with black plastic, until his place felt less like a home and more like a bunker. The police report went nowhere. No missing passenger. No GPS record of the street he described. The ride never existed. People told him it was stress, hallucinations, burnout. He almost believed them. Until the underground station. It was rush hour, the platform crowded and loud. Ethan stood near the edge, staring at the dark tunnel, trying to steady his breathing. Across the platform, a girl laughed with her friends. Different face, different clothes, same tongue piercing. The metal caught the fluorescent light and flashed in a way that made his stomach drop. She turned slowly, as if she felt his stare. Their eyes met. Recognition sparked in her expression. Not surprise, not anger, amusement. She stepped closer to the edge of the platform, tilting her head the way she had in the car. The noise around them faded. Ethan could hear his own pulse, loud and unsteady. "You remembered," she said, her voice clear despite the distance. His throat tightened. "You said I could forget. I said you could choose silence." The piercing glowed faintly, just enough for him to see faces moving beneath the surface of the metal. Waiting. A train roared into the station, wind tearing through the platform. When it passed, she was gone. Ethan backed away, heart racing. That night, he found a small silver stud on his kitchen counter. Cold. Familiar. No blood. No pain in his mouth. Just a faint pressure beneath his tongue and a whisper he could almost understand. By morning, Ethan had made his choice. He went back to driving nights. Some stories, he learned, don't end when you escape them. They end when you start carrying them forward.